Once I realized that the further back I could dig in those memories, the better our conversation was likely to be. I also recommend, a lot of people talk about this and it's wonderful, use photographs, use old photos to stimulate memories. And again, I'm not talking old photos from even from my childhood. I'm saying let's go back further. Even if we need to pull newspaper stories, let's pull some old newspaper print from 1945, something that will stimulate and trigger those memories. It can be wonderful. And it just, like I said, for that moment, you're cheating that dementia, and I'm telling you, that feels good. It really does.
Welcome to the Care Chronicles with a Caring Touch, where compassion meets wisdom in every episode, dedicated to our beloved seniors and caregivers. Join us as we explore the heartwarming stories, experts' insights, and practical advice that make every moment with our elderly truly special. Get ready for insightful conversations, practical tips, and heartfelt moments that warm the heart and nourish the soul. Because here at A Caring Touch, we believe in laughter, learning, and love as essential ingredients to aging gracefully. So tune in, relax, let A Caring Touch be your guide to making every moment count. Hey there, podcast pals. Welcome back to the Care Chronicles. I'm your host, Avishka, and today's episode, I believe, will speak to so many of you currently going through your own caregiving journey. Today, I'm joined by author Leah Stanley, the author for Goodnight Sweet and Everything I Wish I Had Known. Leah stepped into the role of caregiving at a very young age, navigating the challenges facing dementia with love, resilience, and compassion. In this conversation, she opens up about what she's learned through this process, what she wished she had known whenever she had started, and all the different ways and all the avenues that need to be navigated whenever you are in the position of caregiving for someone that you love or care for. So let's dive in. I feel like one of the things that people talk about with dementia is, you're grieving the loss of the person while they're still there. It's like they're physically present, but they're mentally, they're elsewhere. And so that's just how the disease takes over. How did you process that? And what were some things that you did or some tools that may have helped or that you wish you had used?
I had two separate incidents of the multiple incidents over the time I cared for them, but there are two that always stand out. Number one was my grandmother. She had to go into the hospital to have a procedure done, and here she is with Alzheimer's and having a hard time communicating. So I was sitting by her bedside in the hospital trying to be a liaison for her and the nurses. And wow, I promise you, that day was 76 hours long. It was unreal. I mean, what do you do? We have watched TV. There's nothing. It was awful. And you would try to introduce a conversational topic and she would not understand it. It would go right here. And you were just like, oh my gosh. So all of a sudden, I'm looking at God going, please help me. Jesus, please, I've got to have help here. And all at once, it popped into my mind. And so I asked her, I said, hey, Grandma, did you ever visit the Smoky Mountains? I knew full well she had visited the Smoky Mountains. I was not seeking information at this point, but man, did I get it, because she latched onto that from her past. It was not from yesterday past. It was from years ago past. She started telling me all about her trip to the Smokies. She started telling me about the trip. She started telling me about other trips. It was like she came alive. I actually note the story in my book, and I said, for that moment, it is like we were cheating Alzheimer's, and it was glorious. I am telling you, it was like for that moment, we were back, Grandma and Leah, talking again. And I was just like, oh, this was fabulous.
No.
Please keep going. Please tell me about another trip. I mean, it was amazing. She just opened up and the memories tumbled out. And again, these are older memories. That's the nature of dementia. They tend to rob the more recent memories. Has to do with neuroplasticity. You have to kind of keep going down those same neural pathways to get the memories really solidified. And of course, obviously, an ongoing area of study. But the older memories that have been in the brain for years and years, those pathways are very firmly carved, and it takes a very long time for those memories to be disrupted. In time, they will be as they get to later stages, but it takes a long time, which is good news because this is a point of contact. I discovered this and it was the greatest thing I'd ever seen in my life. And with my grandfather, I said there were two incidents. One was her in the hospital with my grandmother. With my grandfather, he was an outdoorsman. So the concept that he was having to be inside in this long-term care community where he was living, he was miserable. He was an active man, he gardened, he kept cows, he was very active, very outdoors. So I was in a meeting, a care plan meeting with the community, the staff there, and we were talking about, he's got to have something to do. There's got to be something. And one, I believe it was the social worker, she goes, if he liked gardening, she said, we have a courtyard and it's enclosed, so it was safe for him. She said, we could carve out an area, he could plant some things. I went berserk. I was like, "Yes." So my grandfather and they went out there, they provided us with seeds, with tools, with everything. We got out there and girl, he just started digging the little holes, putting the little seeds. Next thing you know, I'm leaving out of there and got green beans. I'm just, he sent me home with all these
Oh.
green beans that he had grown. I was like, this is so wonderful. So that was something, again, a very old memory, something that had been in his mind for a long time, how to do this. And he got out there, and I am telling you, it was so wonderful. I recall he was looking at me, said, "Okay, go hand me the trowel, hand me the whatever." And it was just like when I was a kid. I was little Leah, the helper, was running over to grab whatever. It just took me back. It took him back. It was so precious. And that stuff, I wouldn't give anything up for that. And the reason those little memories, little moments became such a big deal is the very thing you were talking about because there was this overwhelming grief that I was experiencing because they were no longer who they had always been. It was like they were and they weren't. It was grandma, she was sitting there, and then suddenly she was asking you for the probably 500th time, did I know that her brother in law had died? And you're just like, oh man, and then she would tell me she'd been talking to mama who had died before I was born. So it's like, you know what I'm saying? It's like you're hearing the voice. This is my grandmother. You can touch her hand, you can hold her hand, and that's wonderful. But then she'll open her mouth and say something like that. And it just a spirit of the heart. It hurts you so, so deeply. So for me, once I realized that the further back I could dig in those memories, the better our conversation was likely to be. I also recommend a lot of people talk about this, and it's wonderful. Use photographs, use old photos to stimulate memories. And again, I'm not talking old photos from even from my childhood. I'm saying let's go back further. Even if we need to pull newspaper stories, let's pull some old newspaper print from
Yeah.
1945. Yeah, something that will stimulate and trigger those memories. It can be wonderful. And it just like I said, for that moment, you're cheating that dementia. And I'm telling you, that feels good. It really does.
And I know you mentioned that they were in a care home, correct?
Yes.
So what
Yes.
kind of support did you have? I know you were the primary caregiver, but what other support did you have? Or I know there's home health and hospice care available as well, and that's something that our agency does. But, you know, at that time, it might have not been as available or accessible as it is
Exactly.
now. So, what resources did you use? And it sounds like you did use some already, but
Yes, definitely. I had tried to let them be in an independent living community, but they had well gone past that. So that turned out to be a disaster. But it was a disaster, a mistake I was glad I made because that brought me to the full reality of what was actually happening. This is what's really, really happening here. And so if I had taken them straight from the hospital where they had been evaluated and gone straight into a nursing home, I would have lived with guilt that would have eaten me alive. Having that, albeit a disastrous stop in between, made me understand hey, they really do need more care than I am able to provide. So we need an alternative that is something that's going to work with their budget. So the best thing for them at that point was skilled nursing. They did need it for medical reasons. My grandmother had a lot of medical needs that had turned up, imagine that.
yeah.
They were probably there for a long time. She didn't go to the doctor. She didn't know. So all of that kind of fell in along with the whole situation, the whole paradigm shifted. So at that point, I was very interested in talking to like the social workers who were able to give me a lot of information. That social worker that worked at Waverly Nursing Home where they were, she was a gem because she was able to educate me. Here's how you can respond. Here's how you deal with these kinds of things. She was wonderful. So that meant a great deal to me. Neither one of them ever had to be in hospice. Actually, my dad, and let me clarify, given the story I told you earlier, my biological father had left. My mother remarried, and the man she married, he's my dad. So when my dad was at the point of the end of his life, we actually had an opportunity to utilize hospice, and they were the greatest people ever. I cannot overtell you how wonderful they were. So, what I want to communicate to the listeners is please don't hesitate. People hear the H word and they get all upset. Hospice does not always mean end of life. It can. And if you are at a place like that, having that support is fantastic. For us, we used with my grandparents, we certainly utilized the doctors, the nurses. I was very much a person that would move heaven and earth to get in front of whoever I had to understand what we needed to do. What was gonna be next? What did they need? What was the best option for them? And I would encourage caregivers, do not hesitate to utilize these professionals who are available. They are there for you. And so don't hold back. Don't hesitate. People get upset thinking, well, I can't ask a question like that. They'll think I'm crazy or they'll think whatever.
No.
You are a person who is in a caregiving situation. You are clearly under duress because you are, as you pointed out, you're grieving. You're grieving the loss of what was, even though they're still here and you can still see them and talk to them. You know kind of where it's headed. I mean, for me, I had that sense that was what was, I mean, they were going to die. I knew it. And I was wrestling with that. That was a very real thing that I was fighting with. And again, a lot of people don't want to talk about that. They don't want to acknowledge, it's like, well, I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to pre-plan a funeral because then they might die. It's like, okay. But you don't want to be stuck with a sudden situation and now they're gone and oh, you haven't done any planning. So I'm saying utilize professionals in the most correct way. They are there to help you, whatever it is. If it's a doctor, take time to talk to the doctor, a nurse, social worker, hospice workers, whoever they are. Take advantage of the information they have and do it early. Do it when you are under the least amount of distress. Don't wait till it's all over and then suddenly, oh no, what are we gonna do?
Yeah. And that's something that we really want to stress in our podcast as well is, like hospice, yes, it is a big scary word, but it shouldn't be. It should be something that, it's an agency that's there to help you because you're already at a point of overwhelm when you're dealing with all the emotional distress, all the financial challenges that may come up. There's so many things and using an agency is not giving up. It's the point of like having care that's peaceful
Yes.
and comforting for you, for your loved one, for the whole family. So this can be more of a peaceful, gradual. I mean, sometimes people do graduate from hospice too. So, it's not, again, it's not giving up. It's not the end all be it all. But granted, a lot of people that are in hospice,
Right.
there is a terminal illness and there are those things that you're working with.
I mean, truly, like
Yep.
my dad, that's why I always give a plug to hospice. They were anchors for us in a most violent storm. It was so wonderful when we did get to that place where the nurse was coming every day because they were anticipating any moment. I mean, that was a lifeline. And I can't tell you what a big deal because, and you don't know. And the good news is for the
Yeah.
people who don't know, I'm glad you don't. I'm glad you've never had to deal with this.
Yeah.
But this is one of those, if you're hearing about it, please file this away under really, that is not a bad thing. And definitely take advantage of, again, these very professional folks they are there to help. That's exactly what they're there for. And there's so many of them. There are just so many. I know in March, we celebrated National Social Workers Month, and I was actually doing a talk up in New England, and I had mentioned if you know a social worker, you go hug their neck because I promise you, they are someone's lifeline. They
Yeah.
are providing a help and a service for someone because I'm telling you, I was that someone at one point with my grandparents, and I
Yeah.
so grateful for these folks, truly.
Yeah. One other question I had was I know you're saying you used you were the only family basically for your grandparents since your dad was not a part of the picture. Were there other family members that were trying to get involved, had opinions? I know there's
Oh my.
probably some listener that, they're the main point of power of attorney for medical or financial reasons, but there's obviously family, whenever family gets involved, they have all sorts of opinions. I know my family does. So, how do you advise them to handle those conversations and, maintain the peace because you're still
Oh,
trying to care for this loved one and still
exactly.
maintain comfort and care in that way?
Well, in my situation, recall that I mentioned my biological father went off and started a whole separate family. So I actually have two younger half brothers. Okay. And there was no real connection with them except through my grandparents. So clearly, when all of this started, they were no longer in the picture to facilitate this connection. It was awful. And I went through, in fact, I cover it in the book, in the Goodnight Sweet book. I tell the story about how I had to go about finding these people and long wound up story. I got on the phone with the second wife. Her name was Shirley, the woman that he had married and then had to go through a legal divorce with my mother, then had to go through another legal ceremony with Shirley. And I'm like, and she did. And I can't even imagine what that was about, but not my problem. But I was on the phone with her and saying, so we've had a little problem with our grandparents. And so she made arrangements that she and my younger of the two half brothers were going to come to the nursing home to visit our grandparents the following Sunday. This was like midweek. I'm talking to her. I get a phone call Saturday night. It is from my grandparents' neighbor. They lived at that time about 2.5 hours away from where I was. So this wasn't like a house I could just run over there 10 minutes away. Their house was a ways away.
Dri
My grandparents' neighbor, Mac, called and he said, so we had a little problem today. And I was just like, oh, what happened? He said, I'd gotten to the point where every time Matt called, I knew it was a problem. I thought I hated to see him call. He was a nice guy, but I hated anytime he had called, he had something terrible to say. This was no exception. He indicated that he said, there was this woman and she came in here today with her son and they brought a moving truck and they emptied your grandparents' house.
Wow.
Yes, they did. I was just sitting there on the phone like, "What?"
How
You can imagine I seriously, you can imagine how awkward the already going to be awkward conversation on Sunday was now even more awkward after what she had done. So, the next day, we're in there and she says, "I got worried about their stuff." And I was like, "Clearly." And I said, "Well, I wasn't as worried about their stuff as I was about them. They were my priority. I didn't care about stuff. She was caring
Yeah.
about stuff." So, she's sitting there in front of them and she's asking me, "So, you've got power of attorney. I guess that means you're the executor of the will too." And I'm like, "Yes." I'm like, "Why are you carving up their estate in front of them? They're still sitting here." It was that level of crass, okay? It was just an unbelievable situation. I tell people today when I talk about it, I cannot believe that she had the nerve to do that. Knowing that we were working with the state for their long-term care, knowing that we were going through all that Medicaid business that had to be dealt with, I was accountable for where things were, and she just went and took it all. That's what just baffled me. I thought, "Who does this? What kind of person does this?" So I didn't know what I was gonna deal with out of them. I was so concerned, I was young and I was naive. I was like, "Are these documents gonna hold if she tries to challenge me in court?" Well, the fact is, looking back now, I can tell you she was not gonna take me to court because number 1, she didn't want the responsibility, but number 2, once she found out what the price tag to take me to court would have been, to only I think she would have lost if she had done that because it was obvious to anybody with one eye and a half sense that I was taking good care of my grandparents, and the people around me knew, and they knew I was involved. Everybody knew Leah. They knew I was my grandparents' granddaughter. So I think even if they had tried to challenge me legally, they wouldn't have been able to do it. But again, I was terrified. I didn't know what they were going to try to do. I thought anybody that would go in and empty the house, I mean, really, what's off the table here? What might they not do? So it turned out my biggest issue didn't turn out to be with them. Once they got the stuff they wanted, they were pretty well out of it. So much out of it, they never visited again. And neither one of them could show up to either one of the funerals. My older half brother did. He came to both funerals. And, we had a good rapport. I was very thankful for that. But the mother and the younger half brother, it was unbelievable. So, again, clearly the obvious motive was money in that case. And again, it was not like my grandparents had just boatloads of money. They did have land But, that was all part of what I was protecting so that there could be an inheritance, but they wanted their grandchildren to have. So anyway, I'm working hard doing all of that. The thing I ran into, on addition to that, I mean, that was the big ugly, but the things that would happen to me is I would get phone calls because once the cataclysmic happens, the word spreads like wildfire through the family tree. Everybody hears about, did you hear what happened to Edward and Clara? And Leah's having to take over and yada, yada, yada. So everybody's talking about it. For weeks, I would come home and I had messages just, I mean, my light on my answering machine would be blinking. It wouldn't even, it would count higher than the number could show. And they all wanted to know basically the same thing. So, what's going to happen to them? And do they have a will? And how much money do they have? It was unreal. I was just like, what? There are people involved here. What is this money thing? Please stop it. Again, I was young. I have come
Yeah.
up through the years and I have heard countless families that have dealt with this kind of thing and worse. So, what I tell folks is be as transparent as possible when you are dealing with the relatives. Answer their questions as best you can. I do not suggest opening the purse and saying, here's how much money they have. You know what? They named you to be power of attorney. They didn't pick these other people over there. So, I don't know that we need to get into all of that minutia. But be transparent about, here's the situation. They have been diagnosed with dementia, and I'm working with their doctors. We are trying to find the very best long term care community for them. Be transparent, answer the questions. I had one lady call. She was in a twist because she went to visit and found that my grandparents were sharing a bathroom with the person next door. And she was incensed. And I say it, I'm doing it a little tongue in cheek because all I could do was chuckle. I was just like, really, that's what you're upset about. Them out lost for 4 days on the side of the road, 2 hours from home. That part doesn't bother you. That was okay. But you're upset because now they're somewhere safe. They're somewhere being taken care of, but they are sharing a bathroom. And this has you upset, really. Priorities here, priorities.
Yeah.
And one lady called, and I tell this because it's just funny. She called and said she was very concerned to make sure that I had indeed secured my grandmother's pillowcases, just marinate in that for a minute. I was like, yeah,
Yeah.
get it. Really? That's what upsets you. Okay, got it.
Yeah.
So, you're going to hear crazy stuff. And then you're going to have people who are going to be like, hey, I was wondering is how much actual money do they have? They're always trying to be smooth about it. And you're just like, really? There's nothing new under the sun. How did this doesn't just naturally come up? It was a mess. But I laugh about it now. I look back and I'm just like, everybody wanted to know basically the same thing. And I'm thinking, again, maybe if we put our focus on the person instead of their estate, or whatever they have. And I chuckle about it now. As I said, I can laugh back now because today I talk to families and I have heard horror stories. I have heard stuff that makes my own family situation look very tame. People who have one either cousin or sibling would wrestle away legally the paperwork, the durable power of attorney and all that. And I've seen people go to court over this. And there's one case where I know of where it actually happened. And I'm like, I don't know the details of why a judge decided to take a legitimate power of attorney away from this person and give it to this person over here. I assume there must have been something going on, but it was just astonishing to me to hear the various things. So what I did is I put together my family relationship chapter. I really wanted to focus on the best to do is get everything prepared ahead of time because having everything in place, let's again use mother as our sample patient. If mother will make out all of her documents ahead of time and she's got, 4 or 5 kids or 3 kids or 2 kids or even one kid, fine. Maybe there's a cousin that was always involved. Mother gets to choose. Mother gets to say, I want this person to handle these things. And that takes a lot of starch out of the argument of, well, it should have been me. Okay, well, mother chose who she chose. So that's the first thing. But that doesn't always fly. Again, there are people that are going to dig their heels in for whatever reason. And they think they're going to do a better job or they're offended that mother didn't ask them or why you, of all people, why. I've heard it all. And I tell people, it's like, look, if they want to spend their money going into court and fighting and arguing this, you just keep being the caregiver. You keep doing your thing. And the whole idea is hopefully that a judge will see you're the person doing all the real work. You're the one in there taking care of everything. And that's going to carry some weight in a court. And so do the best you can. If you are in a situation that is just so intolerable because someone wants to complain, they want to gripe and argue, they want to accuse, in that case, consider mediation. Consider having a mediator. Use the family attorney. That's a place to go. It's a neutral location. Use a family pastor. That is also a neutral location. If this does not work out using these tools at your disposal, there are mediators, professional family mediators. They are not cheap. So if you are really going to have to get to that level, you need to be aware that may be a way to appeal to the other person is if we can't get this worked out, it's going to cost a fortune to go sit down with somebody. But the idea is they are there. Sometimes, to be perfectly honest, it's not an issue of money. Sometimes it is about getting the peace and having a mediator being able to work with both sides to say, hey, let's find our common ground. We're going to all make compromises and we're all going to give something. We're all going to get something. That's what I encourage people to do. If it comes to that, don't just let the bad blood keep going because I'm telling you that gets vicious. And then at the end of it, mother will eventually pass. And when she does, now you've got people that won't speak to each other. You've got people arguing over mother's dining room table and it just breeds more of the same ugly. So if there's a way to stop it, like Barney Fife used to say on the Andy Griffith Show, nip it in the bud. If you could stop it in the early time, at the earlier part, definitely do that.
Thank you so much. Thank you for all of that. I'm sure someone out there, I know if it was me taking care of my loved one, I mean, that was so helpful, especially navigating family dynamics. That's very difficult. And that's something that a lot of people don't know if other people relate to because it's not something that's openly spoken about.
That's the truth. A lot of folks don't go there on that, and they don't want to talk about it. And they don't want to, because if you admit that there's a problem, well, you must not be a very good caregiver. Well, that's not true. But that's what people think. They get to thinking, I can't tell you how frustrated I am about this or how I don't like the fact that I'm having to do this at all. Hey, guess what? I didn't like where my grandparents were. I didn't like what was happening to them. I hated the phone calls that I got.
Yeah.
But man, I would go to the mat for them, and I did. And that's what we do. As caregivers, that's what we do.
Since your grandparents have passed, like what has life looked like since you are no longer caring for them and that caregiver chapter has ended?
Well, as I said in the beginning, my degree in journalism compelled me to write my story down. So I did. I wrote my book, and that was very cathartic for me. But also, just the idea that I'm thinking, this is great that I'm going to hopefully be able to help other people that are coming up behind me. That has been, as I said, I kind of repeat that a lot because it's very important to me because this is hard. This is a horribly hard road to walk. And there are so many dynamics we didn't even have time to touch on. What happens when you don't like the person that you are suddenly responsible to care for? I point out in my book, what would it be like? Consider if Cinderella's stepmother suddenly tapped Cinderella to be her caregiver. That sounds like a bad thing, a really bad thing. But there are family dynamics that are like that. Some family members have problems. So my point was, I like to the idea being able to help these people to come alongside and walk it out with them. And that's what caregiving has looked like for me since that time. My grandmother used to tell me that she was an extremely private person and she was so shy. But she had always told me as I was growing up that she thought she might never get married. She thought she would wind up being a missionary. She said, I just thought maybe I would do something to help people, and help spread the gospel of Jesus Christ and let the world hear this. She talked about this. Well, she did get married and she did have her family, and it came out all the way everything did, and her granddaughter, and she had this great situation. And then she did pass, and she's gone to glory now. And I have often thought to myself, I wonder if she would freak out if she knew that I had taken her very private journey and made it so public. But I thought, no, because she is actually doing right now what she didn't do in her lifetime. That is, she is sharing her story and it is being able to help people. I've had
Mm.
a number of people read the book and they'll come to me and say, this was so cathartic. It was so helpful to see how you were really so ignorant, knew nothing. And then all of a sudden you grew into this role and look what all you were able to do. And I'm like, that's fantastic. So for me, wondering, would she be upset with me if I had made all of this so personal information out there? again, for the fact that it will help folks, I think she'd be glad. I really do.
Mhm. I can already see her, like, looking down, proud of you for that message you're spreading. It's amazing. I mean, it really does open your eyes into, like, something that, at least for me, with home health and hospice, like,
Mhm.
starting to work in this chapter, it's really opened my eyes to, like, what different levels of care people need too, So, like,
Exactly.
I didn't know what was available. I didn't know, like, my grandma last year or the year before had a really bad fall, and she needed
Oh,
some physical therapy.
yes.
So, I didn't even know that was an option for someone to come to the place because we couldn't really, like, wheel her out everywhere. Everyone's working and again, we're happy to take her to these appointments, but
Of course.
having the ease of having someone come to your house or knowing these resources are available to
Yep.
you, and same with the social worker. I know there's many patients that we worked with that our social workers are, they're really gunning to help them find a place to
Yep.
stay.
Yep.
Some people don't have a proper place that they can really be taken care of because there are additional needs that they need as they go on in their life. So that's amazing work that you're
It
doing.
really is. I'm so excited that you do it. I love it because you're right. The whole idea of aging in place, having people be able to stay in their home, hopefully, for their entire life. And if not, knowing when to make that transition and how to do it. Again, the level of ignorance I was operating in is stunning. It is just stunning to me. Yeah, you just don't come out knowing this stuff. You don't know it until you
Don't
need to know it. Right.
Yeah, exactly. You really don't come out knowing it. You don't learn it in school, you don't really learn it in any type of education unless you're
Yeah.
really studying for it, so
Right. Exactly.
one final message, like, if there's any type of one last thing that we didn't cover that you could give the caregivers, any heartfelt message or anything that you really wanna leave them with before we wrap up?
I like to say this. When I started the journey of caregiving, I mean, one of the first things I had to do was I had to go to God. And I was like, in my prayer time, I told the Lord, I don't know what to do. You are going to have to walk me through. And I can tell you for a fact that He did. And it was interesting because I didn't always know I am a planner, have mercy. I like to know 10 steps ahead what we're doing. And, he really didn't take me on that journey. The journey I went on was this is the next step. And I'm over here going, What's next? What about after that? What do I do then?" It was the next thing, but it all got done. And it all got done in a very orderly way. And it's funny because when I was reading my own story, when I was reading back through, doing edits and whatnot, and I would just read different things, I was just like, I see how God walked me through every step. The point I want to make is this: if He did it for me, He will do it for you. I am nobody specifically special that only God's only going to talk to me. No, if He did it for me, He will do it for you. And that's what I want people to know. I'm telling you, you don't have to walk this road alone. Not only are there just a whole host of human people around you, but I'm telling you, you cry out to God, and I am telling you, He will be there for you. That was my experience.
Yes, and that's such a powerful message too, and that's, like, the message we really wanna spread. You are not alone. Caregiver, as a patient,
Absolutely.
there's so many resources out there, and spiritually, so many ways that you can be helped, so you're
Mhm.
not struggling, you're not going through this path unknowing.
Right.
So
Or isolated, which is what a lot of
isolated?
you that's a word caregivers use a lot. They feel very
Yeah.
isolated. And I always say, please don't. You don't have to be. There's just so much available to help you take advantage of it, for sure.
So, how can listeners connect with you? I know your book's available on
Mhm.
Amazon and you're doing workshops and other fun events. So,
Exactly.
maybe we can put in a link to your website right now.
Mhm.
It's leahstanley.com.
Actually, my publisher says to me, says, "Get yourself an LLC." And I said, "Okay, I can do it." So I now funnel everybody through that. So it is the letter E3 caregiving.
Oh,
That's the website. As a matter of fact, we have just updated it. So I'm very excited. Of course, as soon as you update it, you start seeing the 5 things you didn't do. And so now it's like, okay, updating with tweaking coming. And so
right.
E3 Caregiving, the name of my LLC is E3 Caregiving. And so when people have me come and speak, they wind up paying me that way. So that's how it works out. It just made more sense to do it that way. So from a business point of view, but E3 Caregiving is the website. And I am on Facebook, Leah Stanley. I am on, let's see, X, and Instagram is going to be E3 Cares. And I'm also on LinkedIn as Leah Stanley. So, yeah.
And we'll also plug those in the show notes. Thank you so much.
Oh,
This was
thank
so
you.
wonderful. I had a great time.
Oh, this is a great discussion. I appreciate the opportunity so much.
I appreciate your time and all that you do. And I hope our listeners, if there's something that spoke to you from from this podcast, from this interview, and you think it might help another person, help a caregiver, help a person that is currently going through this process. So please share the book, and we'll have all of those links down there so that it's easily accessible for everyone. Thank you for joining us on this heartwarming journey with a caring touch. Be sure to check out our website and connect with us on social media for more stories, resources, and ways to get involved. We're excited for you to join us again in our next episode, where we'll continue to explore the beauty of aging with grace and compassion and dive deeper into topics that matter to our elderly community. Until then, stay connected, stay caring, and we'll talk to you again soon on the Care Chronicles with a Caring Touch.